The cell was quiet. Too quiet. He could hear the faint hum of the ship's engine through the walls, but it was the silence between the pulses that pressed hardest on his mind. A silence filled with things he couldn't see, things that watched him. He sat in the corner, knees drawn up, head against the cold metal. The cuffs around his wrists had stopped glowing days ago, but the raw skin they left behind still burned. He didn't know how long he'd been here. The ship had no cycles, no day or night. Just the cold, the hum, and the stench of something not quite dead. He didn't remember their faces, not clearly. They never stayed long. Just long enough to poke, prod, measure something they didn't explain. And then they were gone. Sometimes they'd bring food, or something like food. Gray, tasteless, and warm like a recently dead animal. He ate it anyway. Not because he wanted to live. Because he wanted to see. See them. Understand them. Know why. He wasn't a soldier. Not really. He'd been on a survey crew. Mapping dead worlds for future outposts. No weapons, no escort. It wasn't supposed to be dangerous. But then something found them. He couldn't remember what the attack looked like. Just that it came fast like lightning across the hall. Screams echoed down the corridor. The metal shook beneath his feet. His friend, a woman with kind eyes, had screamed something at him before the bulkhead slammed shut between them. He never saw her again. He didn't see the ones who captured him until much later. Not until he woke up on this ship, this tomb, with restraints on his wrists and a bitter taste in his mouth. And now he was the last one left. The only human on board. At least that's what they told him. He stared at the smooth wall across from him. No markings. No screens. Just flat metal. He could almost feel the eyes behind it, studying him like some rare creature behind glass. He'd shouted at them once. Demanded answers. Threatened them. But it didn't change anything. They didn't respond to words. Only behavior. So he changed his tactics. He pretended to sleep. To sulk. To surrender. But every second he was counting. Remembering. Noticing. They had patterns, habits. The small one came first every day, always alone, always scanning. The tall one followed hours later, dragging in the food and ignoring him. A third one, silent and hooded, came only once, watched him without speaking, then left. He never saw it again. But that one frightened him the most. Whatever this ship was, it wasn't military. Not exactly. The equipment was wrong. Too old. Too alien. Sometimes the lights flickered when the engines surged. Sometimes the walls bled a thin mist that stank of burnt copper. He once tried to block the door with the food tray. It melted in seconds. This wasn't a prison. It was a lab. And he wasn't a prisoner. He was a subject. He pressed his hand against his chest. His heartbeat felt louder than it should have. His skin, it had started to itch beneath the ribs. A slow, creeping discomfort that hadn't been there before. They'd done something to him. He knew it. He could feel it. That's when he made the decision. If he couldn't escape, he'd make them regret keeping him. A soft hiss broke the silence. The door, the seamless wall, peeled back like folded paper. Light poured in. Harsh, blue, and buzzing with a sound he couldn't place. The small one stood there. Thin limbs, metallic joints, and a neck that bent the wrong way. It didn't speak. Never did. It just pointed to the hallway with one long, spindly finger. He rose slowly. Every joint ached. But he kept his face calm, obedient. He followed. The hallway stretched far longer than he remembered. They were taking him somewhere new. That was rare. He memorized every panel, every flicker of light, every turn. This time he didn't just want to escape. He wanted to understand. They passed a chamber he'd never seen before. It glowed with deep violet light. Inside were tanks, glass or something like it. And in those tanks, bodies. Human. Not moving. Not whole. He forced his eyes forward. He couldn't break now. Couldn't give them a reaction. They wanted that. Instead he walked. Eventually they stopped in front of a curved door pulsing with a low red light. The creature turned to face him. Waited. He did nothing. Then slowly the door parted. Inside the room was darker, warmer. The walls pulsed like skin. At the center, a table hovered, surrounded by coils and wires that moved on their own. And above it, suspended like some god of shadows, was one of them. Different. Bigger. Its body shimmered with faint colors. Not paint. Not armor. Something beneath its skin. A pattern that moved as it breathed. Eyes like burning coals studied him without blinking. It said nothing. But he heard it. In his mind. Do you know what you are? His knees buckled. The voice wasn't a sound. It was a presence. It felt like something pressing against the inside of his skull. Something ancient. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. You are the last captive. The final piece. The mistake that lived. He forced a breath into his lungs. Why? He rasped. The thing moved closer. Its form shifted. It didn't walk, it flowed. Limbs turned to vapor and reformed in different places. He didn't understand what it was. Only that it had never been born. Only built. Or worse, designed. Your kind made a noise in the dark. A scream across the stars. We came to silence it. Then why keep me alive? The air grew heavier. Because you are changing. Faster than the rest. You are not supposed to adapt this quickly. He blinked. I don't know what you mean. You will. A sharp pain pierced his side. He stumbled. One of the coils had wrapped around his ribs. Injected something. Cold. He fell. The floor wasn't metal anymore. It was soft. Like skin. The walls pulsed faster. The creature loomed. You were meant to die. But you survived. And we must understand why. His vision blurred. The pain in his chest flared, then faded. Something was spreading inside him. Something not human. His last thought before blacking out. They're afraid of us. He woke in a different room. Smaller. No bed. No light. Just the hum again. Only this time. He wasn't alone. He turned his head. Another human lay beside him. Eyes wide. Breathing shallow. Alive. He tried to speak, but she shook her head. Her lips moved silently. Not now. She pointed upward. Then made a slicing motion across her throat. They were watching. Still watching. But she was real. He wasn't the last one. Not yet. But the hope in his chest was short-lived. Because just beyond the glass something shifted. A figure. Not human. Not alien. A fusion of both. Watching them. From the inside. The woman grabbed his wrist. Her grip was weak but urgent. And in her palm, pressed between trembling fingers, was a piece of torn fabric. Human military. Stained in blood. But on the back, scrawled in shaky black ink, was one word. Run. And that's when the lights went red. And the walls began to melt. The lights kept flashing. Red, then darker red, then almost black. Sirens didn't ring, but there was a hum in the floor, steady at first, then shifting, warbling. It sounded alive. The walls no longer looked like walls. They sagged, pulsing like stretched skin trying to breathe. The girl gripped his wrist tighter, her eyes wide with fear, but also something else, determination. He tried to ask her something, anything, but his voice wouldn't work. His throat was dry, tighter than it should have been. The air smelled sharp, like burning plastic and blood. The word on the cloth still burned in his mind. Run. From what? The door, if it even was a door, slid open with a wet sound. Nothing stood there. Just a hallway that bent the wrong way. It looked like someone had taken a corridor and twisted it into a spiral. The lights above it flickered one by one as if something was moving past them, too fast to see. Or too quiet. The girl motioned again. Get up. Mo. He stumbled to his feet. Every part of his body resisted. Muscles too weak, head too heavy. The coil injection from before, it hadn't worn off. Whatever they put in him was still swimming through his system, muting things, slowing him down. But fear cut through it like heat through ice. He followed her into the hallway. Neither of them spoke. The ship felt different now. It didn't hum, it growled. The floor was warmer underfoot, almost sticky. Pipes overhead twisted and turned as if reacting to their presence. At one point they passed a window. Not a screen, an actual window. Beyond it stretched a vast sea of stars, but in the distance, something moved. He squinted. No ship. No debris. It was bigger than that. It looked like part of the void itself was shifting. Like space was being folded or torn open. He felt sick. The girl grabbed his shoulder and pulled him along. He realized she knew this path. Or at least part of it. How long have you been here? He whispered, barely able to get the words out. She glanced at him, then turned forward again. Too long. They passed a chamber that had once been some kind of lab. The ceiling had collapsed, metal hanging like torn tendons from the roof. Inside were broken tanks. Some still leaked. The smell made his eyes water. A large figure lay slumped in the corner, alien or something they used to be. It had no face. Just holes where features should have been. What were they doing? He asked. She didn't answer. They kept moving, climbing down a corridor with no ladder, just notches in the wall. He almost slipped. She caught him. He was starting to remember the injection more clearly now. Not the pain, but the sensation it left behind. Like something had touched his insides and rearranged them. She stopped suddenly. A soft clicking echoed ahead. faint like fingernails on glass. Then a whisper. Not in his ear, in his head. A memory maybe. No, it wasn't his voice. It said, "He is awake now." The girl flinched. "You heard that?" he asked low. She nodded. "They don't always talk like that. Only when they think something's gone wrong." "Something has." "Yeah, you." They crouched behind a pipe that ran the length of the corridor. Ahead, another door waited, lit by faint green light. Two figures stood beside it, unmoving. Not guards exactly, more like watchers. They didn't blink. Didn't breathe. "Are they alive?" he whispered. "No. But they'll notice us if we move too fast." "What are they?" "Remnants." He looked at her. "They were people. Once," she said quietly. His stomach turned. "Human. Maybe. I don't think they remember." He wanted to ask more. Wanted to understand. But something inside told him now wasn't the time. The lights above them buzzed again. That tone, it was getting deeper. Closer. The girl moved first. Slow, precise. She stayed in the shadow cast by the broken pipe. He followed, crawling more than walking. Every breath felt loud. As they passed the figures, he tried not to look. But one of them shifted. Not a full move. Just its fingers. Twitching. Like it wanted to move. But something was holding it back. They slipped through the door. It sealed behind them. She didn't wait. She grabbed a panel on the wall and slid it open. Inside were old tools, rusted, covered in grime. She tossed him something. A wrench. "Useful?" she asked. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The room they were in was small. Dark. Some kind of maintenance crawlspace. But it was quiet. And more importantly, it felt dead. No pulses in the walls. No whispers. Just metal. She exhaled. "This part of the ship's older. It doesn't connect to the core anymore. They don't come here." He looked around. "Who are they?" She sat on the floor, drawing her knees in. "You really don't know, do you? I know they took my team. I know they're experimenting on us. I know they're afraid of something." She nodded slowly. "They weren't supposed to be afraid of anything." He waited. "They're called the Mourners. That's what the others used to call them. We thought they were just another extinction race, old tech scavengers. But they weren't. They're more like custodians. They clean up behind empires. Remove traces." "Of what?" "Of us." His throat tightened. "You mean humans?" She met his eyes. "We're not supposed to spread. Not this far. Not this fast. They think something's wrong with our evolution." He tried to process that. "Then why study us?" "Because we don't follow patterns. Every other species breaks after a certain point. War, collapse, stagnation. But not us. We adapt. We grow faster after we break. They're trying to figure out why." "Yes." "Did they find it?" She hesitated. "They found something." He felt that pressure again in his ribs. A crawling sensation, slow and steady, like something beneath his skin was learning how to move. "What did they do to me?" he asked. She looked down. "They've been testing a signal. A sequence. It rewrites genetic responses. They gave it to you to see what would happen." "Why me?" "Because the others didn't survive it." He fell silent. "I didn't either," she added softly. "But they brought me back." His heart skipped. "You mean?" "I died. At least once. Maybe more. I don't remember all of it." He stared at her. Her skin was pale, almost too perfect. Like something that had been rebuilt from memory, not matter. She noticed his look. "I'm still me," she said. "But something's missing." "Like what?" "Time. I don't feel it anymore. I don't know how long I've been here. The others, the ones they kept, we all forgot eventually. But you," she reached toward him, hesitated, then pulled her hand back. "You're not forgetting." "No. They're afraid of that." The ship groaned above them. He could feel the walls breathing again. "They're coming," she said. "Not the ones we saw before. The ones from the deep core." "Core. That's where the real ship is. This whole section is just a trap. Like bait on a hook. But the center, it's alive." He didn't like the sound of that. "How do we get out?" he asked. "There's a transport. Buried beneath the hull. It's fused into their systems, but if we can reach it..." The wall behind them pulsed. She stood. No more waiting. She slid another panel open. A tunnel, small but just wide enough to crawl. "We go now," she said. "Or we stop existing." He followed her into the dark. They crawled for what felt like hours. His arms shook. The wrench in his hand scraped against the metal, sending sparks that briefly lit the space. More whispers. He is learning too fast. Remove the second variable. He gritted his teeth. The girl didn't flinch. She'd heard it too. They dropped into another chamber. This one was filled with pods. Dozens. Hundreds. Stacked floor to ceiling. Some were empty. Others weren't. Faces stared out at them from behind the glass. Some peaceful. Some screaming. He recognized one. A crew member. Not from his ship. But from a photo he'd seen years ago. A science team lost near the edge of known space. Declared dead. They weren't dead. Just stored. For study. Or for something worse. He turned to the girl. How many people have they taken? She looked around, her face pale. Too many. He swallowed hard. We have to get out, he said. We will. But you need to understand something first. What? This isn't just about escaping. If we get off this ship and don't stop them, they'll keep collecting. Keep erasing. How do we stop them? She stared at the ceiling. There's something buried in their code. A fracture. A part of their network that doesn't align with the rest. If we can trigger it, we might cause a collapse. You mean destroy the ship? No. I mean wake it up. He froze. What does that mean? She didn't answer. Because behind them a pod opened. No hiss. No warning. Just a slow, wet crack. They turned. Inside stood a man. Or what used to be one. His skin was transparent, muscles showing underneath, glowing slightly. His eyes were wide. Not focused. He stepped forward. The girl grabbed his arm. Don't move. The man stopped. Then tilted his head. His mouth opened. And from it came a voice not his own. Protocol shift initiated. Variables exposed. Trial nearing conclusion. The lights went out. Everything turned black. Except for one screen flickering to life behind them. A single line of text. Transmission ready. Awaiting subject prime. And just beneath it, a mirror. Their reflection. But only one of them had a face. The other was already starting to fade. She didn't remember falling asleep. One moment, her back was pressed against the cold metal wall of the cargo bay, her hand gripping the broken transmitter like it might save her life. The next, she woke up to a low humming, different from the usual hum of the station. This one pulsed. Like it was alive. Her eyes snapped open. The lights were flickering again, not from a power issue but something else. Something behind the walls. It felt like the station itself was holding its breath. She got to her feet slowly, every muscle aching. The others were still asleep, at least the ones who had made it through the last cycle. Two gone in the night. Just gone. No screams. No blood. Just silence. Her stomach twisted. She didn't dare say their names out loud. Not here. Not where something might be listening. She moved through the corridor, footsteps light, barely touching the floor. The silence pressed in harder the further she went. The shadows seemed longer, heavier. And then she saw it, just for a second. A figure. It wasn't one of them. Too tall. Too still. She froze, her breath stuck in her throat. It didn't move. Didn't breathe. But she could feel it watching. She blinked and it was gone. Just air and hallway again. But something had changed. The air smelled sharp. Electrical. Like the moment before a lightning strike. She backed away, keeping her eyes on where the thing had been. She didn't run. She'd learned better than that. Back in the cargo bay, the others were stirring. One of them, Mika, was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. You saw it too, didn't you? Mika asked, voice low, as if the station might hear her. She nodded. No need for words. We need to go deeper, Mika whispered. There's something behind the sealed sections. Something they didn't tell us about. Another one of them, Aaron, laughed quietly, but it wasn't a happy sound. Of course there is, he muttered. We were never meant to get this far. He tossed a small object into her hands. A cracked data pad, half its screen still working. On it was a log. Not theirs. Not from any of the crew they knew. But from someone else. Someone who'd been there before. Cycle 12, containment failed. They learned too fast. Adjusting cognitive scramblers. Releasing subject Gamma. Last known location, Deck 9. She felt her skin crawl. That deck had been welded shut since before they arrived. The logs went on, short, clipped entries. Like the person writing them hadn't had much time left. Cycle 13. Subject mimics patterns. Memory not safe. Don't sleep near it. Don't think about it. It feeds on thought. She stared at the line. It feeds on thought. Aaron cleared his throat. Whatever they locked away, it's not just smart. It's evolving. And it's hungry. No one spoke after that. There was no need. They packed what they had and moved out. The deeper decks were colder, like the heat just stopped trying the further down they went. The silence grew thicker, like the station itself didn't want them there. When they reached the bulkhead ceiling off Deck 9, the lights above it flickered out. Complete blackness. Mika pulled out a small torch. The beam lit the door, marked with a symbol none of them recognized. Not a warning. Not military. Something older. They forced it open. The metal groaned like it was screaming. The air on the other side was different. Thicker. Heavy with dust and something else. Fear, maybe. A kind of echo that settled deep in the bones. They moved slowly, every step echoing louder than it should have. The walls down here were different too. Scorched. Warped. Like they'd been burned from the inside. Then came the scratching. Faint at first. Like nails on metal. Then louder. Closer. She raised her torch, but the beam didn't reach far. The shadows moved like they were alive. Aaron pressed his back to hers. You hear that? Mika nodded. It's not behind us. It's all around. They kept walking. Past twisted door frames and shattered glass. Past sealed rooms that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. And always the scratching. The whispering. But no source. Then they found the chamber. It was round. Perfectly so. Too perfect for human hands. The floor was covered in what looked like ash, but when she touched it, it felt like paper. Burned pages. In the center was a chair, simple metal bolted to the floor. But the restraints were shattered. Melted. As if someone, or something, had broken out. Mika stepped closer, then froze. The chair was still warm. She felt it too. A slow, creeping heat that came from nowhere. Then came the voice. Not from the speakers. Not from any mouth. From inside. Not words. Feelings. Images. Pain. Hunger. Escape. And then recognition. It knew them. It had been waiting. She stumbled back, heart racing. The others were looking around wildly as if expecting the walls to close in. Aaron's face had gone pale. It's not just intelligent, he whispered. It's been learning from us. Watching. Copying. Mika dropped the torch. The light spun, casting wild shadows on the walls. Then something moved. Fast. Silent. Almost invisible. They ran. No plan. No direction. Just away. The corridors twisted. Warped. As if the station was shifting beneath their feet. Doors that should have been there were gone. Ones that shouldn't be open were wide. And all the while the thing followed. Not loud. Not crashing through. It hunted like a thought. Like an idea that once planted, never left. One by one the lights failed. Their breaths came ragged. The station groaned around them, metal screaming like it was tearing apart. She reached a ladder shaft, grabbed hold, climbed like her life depended on it. Because it did. Halfway up, she looked down. Was there. No face. No eyes. Just shape and shadow. And it was smiling. Not with a mouth. But with memory. She screamed for the others to climb faster. But the shaft groaned and something below cracked. Aaron yelled. Then silence. She kept climbing. No time to cry. No time to stop. Above, a hatch opened. Manual, not powered. She pulled herself through just as the ladder shook violently below. She lay on the floor, chest heaving, and looked up at Mika, who'd made it through just behind her. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. They were back near the command center, but everything was wrong. The screens were on, but showing static. The air buzzed with electricity. The kind that came before a storm. And then the doors locked. All of them. She ran to the control panel. Dead. No override. No code. No escape. Behind her, Mika stared at one of the monitors. It's here, she whispered. It's everywhere. On the screen the static shifted. Shapes formed. Human shapes. Mika. Aaron. Even the others who hadn't made it. The thing had copied them. Every movement. Every voice. Every thought. It had enough now. The screen blinked once. Then a single word appeared. Begin. And the lights died. The darkness wasn't silent anymore. Low vibrations pulsed through the floor like footsteps, but heavier. Not from a single direction. They came from all sides. It was moving inside the walls and the vents beneath the floors. But it wasn't just moving now. It was growing. She pressed her back against the bulkhead, hands trembling as the emergency lights buzzed to life, dim red glows that barely lit the corridor. Mika crouched next to her, eyes fixed on the monitor that had gone black seconds earlier. The static was gone, but she knew what she saw. It had shown their faces. It knew their patterns, their behavior. And it was ready. I don't think it wants to kill us, Mika whispered. Not yet. She swallowed hard. Then what does it want? There was a pause. The lights flickered. To replace us. Before they could move, the ship shook, this time not from within. A rumble passed through the hull like something massive had just docked. Or landed. The sound was different. Deeper. Mechanical. Not part of the station. She looked at Mika, who was already grabbing her shoulder. That wasn't it, Mika said. That was something else. They rushed toward the observation deck, knowing full well it might be a trap. But they had to see. As they climbed, the vibrations intensified like gravity itself was warping around them. When they reached the viewing window, they stopped. Floating outside the station, just beyond the shattered remains of the old satellite arrays, was a shape, silent, vast, not like anything human. A vessel, but not one they'd ever seen in training, not even in deep archives. It looked almost organic. Curved, black, as if grown rather than built. More terrifying than its size was what it was doing. Thin tendrils of light stretched from the ship's surface to the station, touching it gently like fingers tapping a glass tank. It wasn't attacking. It was scanning. The lights inside flickered again. Not random this time. They pulsed, on and off, in a pattern. A message. Mika was the first to speak. It's not alone. That thing, it called them. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. The creature they'd been running from wasn't a prisoner. It wasn't something that had broken in. It was something that had been left behind. A scout. A seed. The main force had just arrived. Her hands clenched into fists. The crew hadn't just disappeared. They'd been taken or copied. For what? Study? Replication? Or something worse? She turned to Mika. We have to stop the link. If they sink. We won't just lose the station, Mika finished. They'll know everything about us. Not just the survivors. Everyone. The colonies. Every defense system. She didn't want to think about how much the creature had already learned. They tore through the corridor, feet slamming against metal, heartbeats pounding louder than the alarms now screaming through the station. The system had woken up, too late to stop it but maybe just in time to delay it. Every step they took, the lights dimmed behind them. The thing was closing in. Not chasing. Hurting. When they reached the core junction, the override system was already corrupted. Code ran across the screen, alien shifting. Characters that didn't belong to any known language. They weren't meant to be read. They were alive. Crawling across the interface like worms through decayed flesh. Mika yanked out the data lines, trying to force manual control, but the panel sparked violently. Her arm jerked back, skin burned. She didn't scream. There wasn't time. It's taking over the systems directly, she hissed, cradling her arm. We have minutes. She knelt by the emergency access and began cutting through insulation, exposing wiring that hadn't been touched since the station was first built. Old tech. Analog. Not connected to the mainframe. Might still work. Behind them, the hallway bent again. Literally bent. The metal curved inward like heat had melted it. But it wasn't hot. Footsteps echoed. Not heavy. Not loud. But hers. Her footsteps. Coming toward them. She turned slowly and saw herself standing there. Same face. Same posture. Same wounds. Except it wasn't breathing. It tilted its head. Smiled slightly. A smile she'd never seen on her own face before. The clone stepped forward. Not fast. Calm. Confident. She grabbed a broken pipe from the floor, hands shaking, and stood between it and Mika. I'm not you, she whispered. The thing nodded. Not yet. It wasn't trying to fight. It was waiting. Watching. She lunged and the pipe passed right through it. It faded like smoke. But it had made its point. This wasn't about physical destruction. It was about identity. Control. The ship outside pulsed again, and a wave of nausea hit her so hard she dropped to her knees. Images flooded her mind. Cities on fire. Skies torn open. Not memories. Possibilities. A war they couldn't win if this spread. Mika finally made contact with the backup line. Static burst from the intercom, followed by a sharp digital tone. That was when the second twist hit. The voice that responded wasn't human. It wasn't the creature either. It was another signal. A warning. We see you. It was broadcast from deep space. A different ship. Another species. Not an ally. But not like the one outside. A rival. They weren't alone in this invasion. They were caught in a war between forces they couldn't begin to understand. And Earth was just another battleground. The message continued, fragmented and cold. Your species will not survive entanglement. Extraction is not possible. Sever the link or be consumed. Then silence. The alien vessel outside had paused. The tendrils retracted. For a second it was like it had heard the same message. And it didn't like it. The shadows on the station grew darker. The clone reappeared. But now it wasn't alone. Other shapes moved behind it. Faces she recognized. Ones they'd lost. They weren't dead. They weren't saved. They had become something else. She stood, blood roaring in her ears. The link had to be cut. But the moment they made a move, the copy of Aaron stepped forward. It spoke with his voice. You can't stop what's already begun. You brought us here. You made contact first. Her heart stopped. Those old transmissions. The ones sent decades ago. They hadn't just reached empty space. Someone had been listening. Everything they were living through wasn't an accident. It was an answer. She and Mika looked at each other, not speaking. No time. No certainty. Just understanding. They ran for the final failsafe. One last chance to cut the power to the entire station. But doing so would trap them inside. Maybe forever. The shadows followed. So did the copies. The alien ship pulsed again, this time with a low hum that passed through every wall, every cell. It had begun sinking. They had seconds. As the control room came into view, sparks fell from the ceiling. The station was tearing apart under the pressure of the signal. Reality itself felt thinner. Time slowed. And in that suspended moment she saw it. Not the creature. Not the ship. But Earth. On a flickering monitor. Still safe. Still unaware. For now. Then she reached the failsafe controls. And stopped. Because standing between her and the panel was her again. But this time it was speaking in her voice. And it was crying. Not fake. Not mockery. Real tears. And that terrified her more than anything else. Because it meant it had learned emotions. It had learned regret. And it still chose this. Mika yelled behind her, but she couldn't hear the words. Everything went quiet. Just her. And herself. And the countdown flashing red on the panel. 10, 9. She took one step forward and the copy raised a hand. Not to attack. But to beg. Then the lights went black. Everything froze. And the station began to fall. The station was falling. Not in the physical sense. Those systems were collapsing and the lights were gone. But in the way something falls when it's already broken inside. Reality warped. The walls shimmered with faint outlines of other versions of this place, like ripples in a cracked mirror. Her breath came short, her eyes locked with her own reflection, still standing in front of the failsafe panel, still crying. And yet, it didn't move. Mika's voice broke through the static again. Do it. Now. Before it's too late. But how do you destroy something that looks like you? That feels what you feel. She moved slowly, placing her hand against the panel. The clone trembled. For the first time it looked unsure. And in that moment she knew, it wasn't in control. Not fully. It was trying to become her, yes. But it didn't understand everything yet. That was the weakness. She stepped forward. You think I'll hesitate, she whispered. I don't think, the copy said. I remember. I am you. Then you should know I never stop. And she drove her fist into the emergency override switch. The backup power grid surged to life, running through analog circuits too old to be infected. The failsafe system kicked in. A hard disconnect. Every digital pathway that linked the station to the alien ship was instantly severed. The lights returned, harsh white, flickering, but real. The humming stopped. The pressure in the walls eased. The link was broken. But something else happened too. The copy didn't scream. It smiled. Mika stared at it in horror. Why is it smiling? Because it wasn't the only copy. From somewhere deep within the ship, another signal burst outward. A wave of data, unfiltered, raw, tore through what remained of the internal network. It wasn't from the alien vessel outside. It was from Earth. Old code. Really old. A beacon from an old research station, buried and long forgotten. Someone years ago had found something. An artifact. Something that didn't belong to Earth. And they studied it, recorded it, then buried it when things started going wrong. But the signal had never stopped. She remembered it now, half buried in system logs. A transmission accidentally relayed through deep space probes. Not intentionally sent. Just leaked. And that's what brought them. The invasion didn't start when the alien ship arrived. It started when humanity tried to understand something it should have left alone. She turned to Mika, realization sinking in. We were never the target. We were just the mirror. The clone started to dissolve, its body breaking apart into a mist that shimmered with fractured light. The other shadows faded too. Not in pain. In purpose. Their mission was done. Outside, the alien ship moved, slowly turning. Not away, not toward. It was rethinking, recalculating. The sudden silence in the station, the broken link, the severed signal, it confused it. That was the only chance they had left. The failsafe had stopped the spread. But not the knowledge. They had to finish it. She and Mika raced back toward the communication relay. With the alien link broken, the old Earth signal had come through again, full bandwidth. Data flooding the system. If it reached the outer relays, the process would start over. Somewhere else. Mika slammed a bypass open. We can reroute the core. Burn the channel out. She hesitated. That'll kill the entire comms array. We won't be able to send anything. I know. No one will know what happened here. Mika looked at her, eyes sharp. If we send this out, they'll come again. They'll just find us faster. She nodded. Sometimes surviving meant staying silent. The final commands took only seconds. The system trembled under the overload. Sparks rained down. The old cables fried. The data stream died. And with it, the connection. Outside, the ship twitched once, then vanished. No flash. No noise. It was just gone. Gone but not forgotten. The station went quiet. Not broken. Still alive. But hollow. She sank to the floor, heart pounding, tears finally breaking free. Mika sat beside her, silent. They were alive. But they weren't saved. Not really. They had stopped the invasion, for now. But the thing had seen them. Touched their minds. Learned their instincts. And it wasn't just one species. There were others. The second signal, the rival voice, it had warned them. Not out of kindness, but out of competition. The galaxy wasn't empty. It was watching. And Earth had just revealed itself. Later, once they managed to access one working pod and realign the old subspace emergency line, they prepared a message. Not a call for help. Not a warning. Just a choice. They told Earth the truth. Then they told them to decide. Investigate the source again or shut it all down and forget. The screen dimmed as the message was sent. She stood at the viewport once more, watching the stars blink quietly in the distance. No sign of the ship. No more shadows. Mika stepped beside her. Do you think they'll listen? No. Pause. But maybe they'll wait. Maybe that's enough. And as they turned away, deep in the black silence beyond the stars, something shimmered. Faint. Barely there. A ripple. Something watching. But not moving. Not yet. They had won. But they hadn't ended it. Because the last captive wasn't them. It was still out there. Waiting for the door to open again. The stars outside hadn't changed, but something in her had. She kept staring through the cracked viewport, as if the emptiness could answer the questions still turning in her mind. But deep space doesn't explain. Just waits. Behind her, Mika worked in silence, patching up what little was left of the systems. The station was barely holding together. Life support was running on backup oxygen, gravity was uneven in parts of the ring, and the last functioning power cell wouldn't last more than a few days. But they had time. Not much. Just enough. The alien ship was gone. The network was severed. The strange mimicry that had nearly taken her place ended. But that didn't bring peace. Not really. What remained was the echo of what could have happened if they'd hesitated. If she had waited a few seconds longer. If she had chosen to trust the wrong voice. She turned toward Mika. He looked older. Not from age. But from the way trauma lingers in the lines of your face. They hadn't slept since the override. Not really. Dreams felt dangerous now. They knew everything, she said finally. Everything about us. Mika didn't look up. Not everything. They didn't understand sacrifice. She leaned against the wall. They learned fast though. Too fast. That's why we stopped the signal. She didn't answer. Because stopping the signal didn't erase the memory. Somewhere out there, in some buried archive, those fragments still existed. The old transmissions. The scans. The moment humanity touched something alien and tried to decode it. That was the first mistake. The invasion hadn't come with fire or weapons. It came with understanding. With curiosity. They hadn't needed to break in. We'd already let them in, through data, through language, through every system we linked to the stars. Mika looked at her. Do you think anyone will find this place? They will, she said. Eventually. Then what? She exhaled slowly. Then it starts again. Unless they choose to forget. That was the real battle. Not with aliens. But with ourselves. The station had started broadcasting a low-frequency signal. Nothing detailed, just a pulse like a heartbeat. A beacon meant for rescue teams. But it also carried a final message, encrypted, locked behind layers of failsafes. The truth. The invasion that never quite began. The mind that tried to replace them. The warning from another voice, another presence just as unknowable. And Earth would have to decide. Mika finished stabilizing the last life support node and slid down beside her. You think they'll believe it? She gave a tired smile. They won't have to believe. They'll feel it. If they try to dig too deep, the thing we found will dig back. He looked out the viewport too. It's weird. After everything, I still can't believe it was real. She thought about the clone. The moment it smiled before vanishing. It was real. But it wasn't alive the way we are. What was it then? She shrugged. A mirror. Or maybe a door. They sat in silence for a while. The station creaked faintly, metal adjusting to the vacuum shifts. The universe outside didn't care. But it didn't have to. The damage was already done. Humanity had reached into the dark and grabbed hold of something it didn't understand. And it had grabbed back. She remembered the first time she saw the alien ship. Just a shadow near Saturn, no lights, no heat, just presence. Now it was gone. But its trail lingered. Not just in the systems they'd purged but in their thoughts. The way it studied, adapted, changed. It wasn't an army. It was an idea. An infection of identity. And ideas didn't die easily. She leaned her head back. You think we can make it until someone gets here? Mika looked at the station clock. If we ration everything, maybe? And if they don't come? He paused. Then said quietly, then at least we stopped it. The quiet between them wasn't cold. It was the kind of quiet you get after surviving something you can't explain. Words didn't feel necessary anymore. They just needed to stay awake, keep moving, keep thinking. The station drifted. Outside, the field of stars stretched endlessly in every direction. No more pulses. No more whispers. But something still pressed on her chest. A question she hadn't dared speak. What if that other voice, the one that warned us, what if it wasn't trying to help? Mika turned. What do you mean? What if it just didn't want us taken by them? She said, her voice barely a whisper. What if it wanted us for itself? He didn't answer. But the silence felt heavier this time. She stood and moved to the command terminal. The logs were still intact. Buried deep in the lower levels, among radiation-corrupted files and corrupted sensor recordings, there was something new. A message. Not from the alien ship. Not from Earth. It had appeared the moment the failsafe activated. It had no signature. No origin point. Just a string of audio data heavily degraded. She pressed play. A voice, human-sounding but distorted, spoke only 4 words. You will find me. Nothing followed. No frequency. No response. Just static. She shut it down. Mika stared. That wasn't them? She shook her head. No. That was something else. Do you think it's already started again? I think it never stopped. They didn't speak much after that. The days passed slowly. Rations held. Emergency systems fluctuated, but the station didn't fail. They took turns monitoring the beacon. Still nothing. But each night, just before sleep, she'd dream of that voice. Not screaming. Not threatening. Just waiting. As if it knew she'd look for it. As if it knew that humans couldn't resist answers. And maybe that was the final lesson of it all. The alien invasion wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even a thing. It was the question itself. And the more we tried to solve it, the closer we got to losing who we were. In the end, they were found. A deep-range salvage vessel, weeks later, locked onto the emergency pulse and rerouted. The rescue crew didn't believe the first report. They thought it was some kind of psychological breakdown. But the logs told the truth. The erased networks. The AI corruption. The vanishing ship. And that voice. Some of them wanted to study it. Some of them wanted to warn Earth. But she said nothing. Just handed over the command key with the encrypted message and asked them one thing. Don't send anything back. They didn't understand. But they listened. And for a time that was enough. She watched the stars as the rescue ship pulled away. Her hand brushed the viewport one last time, leaving behind a faint smudge in the glass. Somewhere out there the thing was still waiting. Not just for her. For anyone. For everyone. But maybe that was okay. Because now, at least, someone knew what to look for. Not the ships. Not the monsters. But the moment the question arrives. And if Earth can resist asking it again, then maybe, just maybe, humanity still has a chance. She closed her eyes, finally resting. And behind her, the stars kept shining, cold and quiet. But no longer alone.